All right, today's podcast is about life and leadership, noise versus signal. What are the priorities that you have in your life? I think that it's interesting that we're surrounded by noise in our lives. I mean, it's everywhere. And this idea of the urgency that is placed upon us by things that really are not that urgent, by the opinions of other people, just the distractions that are happening all the time. And the problem is that most of this noise is not helping us grow. All right, it's not helping you grow. What I care about is the signal. What I care about is, what are your priorities? What are your priorities in your life? What are your priorities at work? What are your priorities as a leader? And if we can focus on this signal, all right, it's called, again, if we're looking at noise versus signal, if you can start to ignore some of the distractions, it takes work. If you can focus more on the signal, on your priorities, you will become much more successful. And realistically, signal is what matters the most. It's about your core values. It's about your vision, all right? It's about the truth underneath the chaos. And it is so interesting. I'll take an example here. If we look at, and people have heard this before if you've done much reading, the idea of what happened to Blockbuster in the early 2000s, all right? Blockbuster was the king of movie rentals. I mean, I'm old enough that we got a lot of stuff from Blockbuster and all the little kind of peripheral stores that were similar to Blockbuster. There were thousands of stores. They made huge revenue, lots of profit. They were the dominant brand. And then what's so interesting is that there was this little scrappy company, right, called Netflix, that was mailing DVDs in red envelopes, all right, to people. And they were experimenting with this new idea of streaming, which these days, like my kids have no concept of a life without video streaming. Us old people, we know what it was like before. I mean, I used to, again, there's enough people that'll see this podcast that will understand, VHS videos, and then went to DVDs and all that. But what's key is that Netflix, they got caught in the noise. All right. I'm sorry. Blockbuster got caught in the noise. All right. And what's really funny is that Netflix in 2000 actually offered to sell itself to Blockbuster for $50 million, which was nothing at the time. They're worth so much now, billions of dollars now, and Blockbuster laughed him out. All right. They laughed him out of the room. And why? It was because Blockbuster was focused on the noise. All right. Blockbuster was focused on themselves and not their customers. All right. They were focused on how much their stores were making, and all of the late fee revenue. And that was their downfall. All right. They were happy when someone brought in a DVD late, right? Or a VHS late, because they would charge them for it. And that was one of the things that converted people into Netflix so much more. The legacy business model told them that, we should try to just take what we have and grow it without always looking at how do we serve our customers as best as we can. What was really unfortunate is that they were distracted and not focused on the signal. And the signal was that consumer behavior was changing. All right. People wanted convenience. They wanted flexibility. They wanted an easier way to be able to watch movies. Netflix was giving them that. All right. He was listening for the signal. All right. The head of Netflix was listening for the signal. And what I think is important is that if we know what our priorities are, all right, if we know what is most important to us, then we don't get lost by the distractions near as much. In my leadership program, one of the things that I do with people is we have everyone on their first session. It's a 6-session program. On their first session, we have them write their rules for life. And you can have anywhere from 5 rules to 10 rules to 15 rules. I have like 15 rules. And it is how I want to make sure to live my life. It is all about the rules that I want to live by, not black and white, hard and fast. These are the general rules. Like my first rule in my rules for life is that life is a wonderful gift, and I need to remember that I'm going to die. And it's not meant to be morbid. It's meant to remind me that every day that I have is a gift. And I shouldn't waste my moments. I shouldn't waste my days. I sure shouldn't waste my years. That is signal, right? That is priority. That is a focus on what really matters the most in my life. And I've got, like I said, about 15, different rules. And what is key is each of us needs to make sure that we are taking the time to make sure to look at what's most important in our lives. We need to make sure that we, along with having to do all the little things, again, if you're a parent with little kids, you realize that the distraction is constant. You know what I mean? And it's like you never have time for yourself, which is also part of life, right? That's part of life, is this idea of parenting teaches us to be selfless, right? Parenting teaches us that we are going to give something to someone else, our time, our energy, our love, and we're going to develop these little people, all right? We're going to grow these little people, and they will be our legacy, And the key is, if each of us can make sure that we take the time to focus on our priorities, if each of us makes sure that we can take the time to figure out what are our values. And you'll see this across a lot of my podcasts, is that I talk about our values. I talk about your priorities. I talk about the guiding principles of how we live our lives. Because if you do those things well, if you make sure to focus on the signal, then you won't have happen what the head of Blockbuster did, where he lost his focus on the customer and he was distracted by the money. And we need to make sure that we are not distracted by all the things that are happening in our lives that are really not that important. We have to focus on our signal. We have to focus on the fact that if we can make sure to live our lives by our priorities. For me, it is God, family, work. And I put health in there, kind of mixed in. What are your priorities in your life? What is the signal in your life that should be your guide, right? That should be the thing that helps you to live the life that you are proud of. Because if you focus on the signal, if you focus on your priorities, when you look back, how can you not be happy? Because if I focus on my faith, if I focus on my family, first and foremost, those two things, and if I dedicate my life to make sure to do right by them, then I will be happy. And if I make sure that I spend my time at work doing what I love and empowering other people and inspiring other people and making sure to have impact on other people, that's why I love coaching so much. That's why I started this entire leadership program, is I wanted to have impact. I have a mission statement for my life that is my truest signal, right? And it is that I want to be a life-changing force for good in the world, all right? I want to be a life-changing force for good. And then hopefully I can help others to do the same. But if my focus, my mission, my signal is to be a life-changing force for good, and I use that as my guide each day, each month, each year, then I know that I will do the right thing. So please make sure that you realize what your signal is, what your priorities are. Figure out what your mission is. And if you can live by those things, you'll be happy. If you ever need help, I'd be happy to do coaching with you. I'd be happy to have you go through my leadership program. Just make sure to go to our website and you'll see all the information. Thanks and take care.